Well, we're living in interesting times, that's for sure. There's all kinds of news about rising patriotism in Canada. It's hard to believe, I know. It seems like only a few short years ago that things like the Freedom Convoy were being condemned for its overt use of Canadian symbolism, specifically the Canadian flag. And now, given the Trump tariffs or the threats of Trump tariffs, it seems like there's this whole welling of newfound Canadian patriotism. I, for one, have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, I like Canada. I like what it stands for, or what it has traditionally stood for. Like anything, it's a complex amalgam of different ideas and thoughts. But in general, I like Canada and what it has stood for. But there's something about this rising Canadian patriotism that I find a little off-putting. And now maybe it's the whole COVID episode that's maybe a little sensitive to, I guess, a welling crowd, or what seems to be like a mob mentality. You remember from COVID such hits like, "We're all in this together," "Nobody's safe until everyone's safe," "It's a pandemic of the unvaccinated," and on several other things, a fringe minority, of course. But there was just this beating of a drum, and we all got swept up in it, or a lot of us did. A lot of us stood against it as well, and I think if you're following my channel, you might be in that category. And many of us have paid a price for standing up against what seems to be the popular opinion. So what do we do with this Canadian patriotism that seems to be welling up? I was thinking about what the Bible has to say about things like this, about mobs specifically. I've been reading through the book of Acts, and it struck me that basically wherever Paul and his companions are going, the authorities seem to be stirring up a crowd against them. So it's not Paul and the new Christians, they call it the people of the way. It's what early Christianity was called in the book of Acts. So it wasn't Paul and the Christians stirring up the crowds, but it was the people that were against this message that were stirring up the crowds. And it happens over and over again. And it struck me that I can't think of a single episode in the Bible. Maybe you can. If you can, point it out to me, because I'd be curious to know. But I can't think of a single episode in the Bible where the mob or the crowd was sort of deemed good, or, well, actually one comes to mind. I guess Jesus's entry into Jerusalem a week before on Palm Sunday, the week before he was crucified, people did come out to celebrate. So there's that counterexample. But that very same crowd a week later were the ones crying, "Crucify him, crucify him." And that says a lot, because we can get changed very easily, it seems. Those same people who were celebrating him one moment are calling to crucify him the next. And it seems to me in this moment here, we've got people that it seemed like were calling, Canada, this colonialist power, that's been, that we should be a post-national state, I think Trudeau said a number of years ago, and that we need to confront our racism and all this sort of that Canada and the West is bad. Now all of a sudden it seems like these same people are, happy clappy for Canada. And I'm curious why people can shift so easily. There's a few other episodes in the Bible where, crowds play an important role. I guess the other positive role, so I guess it's a little more complex than I thought. Certainly the Pharisees, when they were, trying to trap Jesus and, put an end to him, it did talk about how they feared for the crowds. But mostly it seems like this crowd mentality is a negative thing. I think of the scene with the golden calf in Exodus. Moses goes up the hill, Aaron's left with people, and it seems like he's gone for about 20 minutes, and the crowd basically demands that they create a golden calf to worship. There's the whole scene at Sodom and Gomorrah where the crowd is demanding that, well, I won't get into what they're demanding, but you could read the story yourself. And as I said, in Acts, there's all these scenes where the mob is getting stirred up. So I question the mob mentality. And I also question, what does it say about us if we can be changed so easily? Now, I think there's a temptation, I fall prey to this temptation, where we think that advertising doesn't work on us. Like other foolish people, it works on them but not on me. But I think we're all affected by these narratives, and certainly the media, and I won't go on about it here, but the media and the elites and sort of the people that sort of set the trends, there seems to be this, like I said, happy clappy, patriotism, and it just leaves me questioning the motives behind this. So what do we do with this? I think there's a few things that we need to, that I think COVID has taught us, or has taught me, I think many of you, is if we're looking to the crowd, if we're looking to the media, if we're looking to our politicians, right or left or center, for what is right or what is good, we're going to have trouble. That we need to find something deeper, firmer, that we can use as our reference point. For me, as a believing Christian, that is ultimately God is my anchor, my reference point. More specifically, it's God revealed in the person of Jesus as revealed in scriptures. And there's more I could say about that. But broadly speaking, I have this faith that I use as an anchor by which I can judge other things. I can judge, crowd mentality. Does it mean all crowds are necessarily wrong or bad? Not necessarily, but I think we need to question these things. The Apostle John, in his first epistle, urges us to test the spirits. 1 John 4:1. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. And I think when it's the media and politicians and social media that is pushing our buttons, I think we need to question the powers behind that. And in order to question it, we need a firm place to stand. Similarly, I think about social media. It makes me think of there's a passage in James where he tells the readers to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And that's good advice. It's advice that I need to hear, because I have to admit that, I look online, I look on X, I look at the CBC and places, and I do get frustrated about what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. And I think we need to take a pause and question, test those spirits, especially those spirits that are actually doing sort of the opposite, the exact opposite of what James is telling us. James tells us to be quick to listen. Social media tells us, don't even listen, just react. Post your comment right away. Don't read the article. Don't reflect on it. Just react, and be quick to anger. Be outraged. Be upset about this. And I just fear where that's taking us as a society. And this happens on the right and the left. Now that the right is becoming a little more ascendant since Trump's election victory, these bad things can happen on both sides. This isn't so much about a right and left thing. I've seen people on the right that, push these emotional buttons. And I think no matter where we are on the political spectrum, we need to have that solid anchor. We need to test the spirits. Not everything that comes our way is of a good source. In fact, a lot of what we're seeing today is from, I think, a bad source. And if you're listening to things that are making you angry, that make you want to react, question where that's coming from. And I think the lesson that I've learned through COVID, and this was particularly palpable right around this time 3 years ago. I don't remember the exact timing, but I think it was after our last visit in Ottawa, end of February. It might even be February 22nd. I'm not sure why that comes to mind. Maybe I'm thinking of 22 for the year. Anyway, basically, just as the convoy ended, I think that's when Russia invaded Ukraine. And the same people, the same media that was telling us how scary and evil the trucker convoy was, immediately all these Ukrainian flags were everywhere, and everyone was happy clappy about Ukraine. And I have to admit, had I not been to Ottawa for the trucker protest, I might have accepted that Ukrainian narrative more readily. Now, even today, this 3 years later, I don't really have a strong opinion on Ukraine and Russia. I admit I'm fairly ignorant about that part of the world. I don't think that countries should invade other countries, but I know enough that it's not as simple as, this side's good and that side's bad. That's not the human condition as I understand it. But anyway, my point is how quick everyone was to put the Ukrainian flag up. And it just made me suspicious, like who's behind this, and why are they trying to manipulate us? Like, test the spirits. What are the spirits behind these messages? I think if we're to defend against this, we need a few things. We need, I think, a grounding. We need wisdom, frankly. We have lots of information. We might even have lots of knowledge. I don't know about that. We're bombarded with information. We've got AI. We've got search engines. We've got social media. We've got tons of stuff coming at us. But we seem to lack wisdom. And I think part of that is because wisdom, I believe, is a spiritual thing. It's, the information is about the raw data that's out in the world. But what you do with that, how you use it, if you use it, how you apply it, I think you can only do that if you filter that through certain values. I think that's kind of what wisdom is. It's not just knowing, but taking your knowledge and coupling it with your values and your aim. And again, for me as a believing Christian, my values and my aim, my values come from God, and my aim is God, the person of Jesus, his teaching and his ways and things that are resonant with him. That's my aim. That's what I believe I'm called to do. So we need that grounding in wisdom. And then we need to test. We need to be discerning. Jesus tells his followers to be as gentle as doves and as wise as serpents, because he's sending them out, like sheep among wolves. That the world, there's a lot of nefarious people and entities in the world. Not everything is what it seems. And, not to turn this into too much of a Bible study, but in Ephesians chapter 6, Paul warns us that, our battle isn't against flesh and blood, but it's against spiritual entities. Now I know spirits in today's day and age, for, if you're not, well, even if you are a Christian, these are things that after the Enlightenment, they seem a little strange to be talking about spirits and demons. And there's different ways you can think about it, but think about it as what is animating someone. So James says, be slow to anger. When you're angry, or when I'm angry, there is something sort of, if I allow my anger to animate me, you could say that I am beholden by the spirit of anger, and I know that good things don't come when I'm animated by that spirit. So we need wisdom. We need that discernment to test, what is going on. And I think we need the courage to be willing to stand up, even when we're in the minority, as we saw with COVID. There's a lot of pressure for people perhaps like you and people like me who didn't want to be too quick to accept the narrative. And it's scary and it's lonely. And again, the Bible has lots of examples of this. I think of like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where they're under pressure to basically worship a false god. And the early church too, that was a big theme, where you need to offer a pinch of incense to the Roman gods or to Caesar to pledge your fealty to an earthly kingdom. And that pressure really mounts up, and it's hard to stand in the face of that pressure. I'll leave you just with this, that foundation that I think we need. At the end of Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount, which is in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, right at the end, he talks about being wise or being foolish. I'll just read this passage here. It's Matthew 7, starting in verse 24. So these are Jesus' words. He says, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on a rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall." So where's our foundation? If we are the type of people who one day can be kind of anti-Canadian, thinking we're these settler colonialist, nefarious people and then can be shifted that, we're now suddenly patriots. If we're shifting so easily, what does that say about what our foundation is? I think we need to question some of these things. And I think you should question, what do you believe in? And would those things change if the 5 closest people in your life had an opposite opinion, or 10, or if the media changed their tune one way or the other? I think we shouldn't judge our opinions based on their popularity, but we should base our opinions and our stances with how well they align with what we believe to be the foundational truth upon which we live our lives. There's some food for thought. Tell me what you think. Tell me, again, I do kind of like, on the one hand, a renewal of Canadian patriotism, because I think there is a lot of good that Canada has done and what Canada stands for. So should we embrace this patriotism? Should we reject it? Should we accept some of it and reject others? How do you suggest we navigate through this? If the political winds are shifting to things that you held prior to the shift, should you simply embrace that and say, oh, good, people have come around to my point of view? Maybe. But do we also need to be careful? I'm curious. This is complicated. And as I said out there, maybe the mobs in the Bible, even they are a little bit nuanced, as a few of them did seem to be sort of on the good side. But I think those are the exceptions. Let me know what you think about those Bible passages, and specifically about how we ought to conduct ourselves as these political winds change and as the media seems to be changing the message almost daily. But for now, thanks for watching. Please do leave a comment below. I do read them all, and I'd be interested in hearing from you, what you think I got right, what you think I got wrong, and what you'd like me to talk about in the future. Thanks for watching.